Hello everyone, high energy in the startup space today, and I'm going to tell you about all the companies that are making news. I'm Priya Sheth and you're watching the Daily Dispatch. In today's news, we have stories that are about exciting funding rounds as well as expansion plans, and the top three companies that are in focus today are Dream Sports, Heads Up for Tails, as well as Verse Innovation. Headline number one, Dream Sports, the parent company of Dream11, which is India's only gaming unicorn, has set up a $250 million corporate venture capital fund. The fund will be investing into sports, online gaming, as well as fitness tech startups. Now, the fund will back startups that have the potential to achieve revenues of about $100 million in 5 years. Well, headline number two, pet care company Heads Up for Tails has announced a $37 million Series A round of funding led by World Invest as well as Sequoia Capital India. The investment will help Heads Up for Tails increase its distribution footprint across India as well as accelerate new product development and manufacturing. Well, moving on to headline number three, digital media platform Daily Hunt's parent, Verse Innovation, has raised a whopping $450 million from investors. It will be using these funds to expand overseas as well as broaden its e-commerce play. Now, Verse claims to have over 50 million creators with over 80 billion video plays per month across its platforms. All right, then, well, moving on to our second segment, I have with me a power-packed panel, all the experts from the vehicle renting space, a space that has been very hot these days. Let me give you a quick introduction to each of them. We have Greg Moran from Zoomcar, we have Sunil Gupta from Avis, and we have Sakshi from Myles. Thank you very much for joining us today, panel. I want to begin by asking you, Greg, Zoomcar seems to have seen a stellar growth over the last couple of months, owing to the kind of more and more people opting for vehicle renting as a category. So run us through what your experience has been over the last couple of months.
Sure. So I think coming out of the second wave, so over the last really 2 to 3 months, as things have kind of gradually started to pick back up in terms of reopenings and restrictions getting lifted. I think we've seen, obviously, there's a lot of pent up demand from people who are kind of looking to get out from the last 3-4 months where people were much more confined. So I think people have gotten used to a little bit of that, after the first wave and that reopening, and so I think we're seeing sort of a similar such behavior now, and I think particularly because people, last year the whole summer got kind of curtailed given the virus, and now even the beginning of the summer was largely curtailed. So I think there was a lot of pent up demand because of that, and I think we're seeing people still want to be mindful of being still safe and secure, but now as the vaccine is kind of grown and scaled over the last 2 months in particular, I think that definitely has given a good tailwind. That's what we're trying to do.
Oh, Priya, yes. I think what we've seen is, as Greg was mentioning as well, with the lockdown sort of opening up over time, we are seeing a large number of people who are interested in a more safer option. Domestic travel is on the rise, and the more you travel on the road with or your personal vehicle, it just brings in another layer of safety for customers, and which is why actually on both the times that we've seen the lockdown sort of opened up, in the first wave as well as the second wave, the growth has been tremendous, and that shows that I think people are just raring to get out of their homes.
See, essentially, I think I would just second what Greg and Sakshi have said, because we are seeing a huge rebound in travel after the second wave. If you distinguish between the first wave and second wave, the second wave recovery has been much, much faster. And a lot of it is to do with the fact that people are worried about stepping out into public transport or shared cabs. Even people who are going to work now prefer to have their own vehicle or a vehicle which has been dedicated to their use, which you have when you have a rented car for a period of time. So we are seeing that a lot. And just to compare the first wave and second wave, in the same, let's say, month of July, the volume has been almost 4 times what we saw last July. So I think people are also getting more confident about stepping out. They've got used to how to manage the COVID pandemic. So we're seeing a much faster recovery now. And I think if the trend continues, we should be back to pre-COVID days in a couple of weeks. most of the demand is happening from metropolitan cities, and they are going on stay vacations or whatever you would want to do to places close by. We're seeing a lot of buoyancy from large cities.
Right, that's an interesting insight. Specifically on this topic, I want to bring in both Greg and Sakshi to try to understand what's the kind of, which are the pockets that are doing well, where we're seeing an increased amount of traction in terms of more people renting out cars, and other popular destinations that we're seeing out there. So, Greg, if you could begin with your update on Zoom.
Sure. Well, I think what's interesting, what we've seen is there's been a huge spike. I think there it's kind of been two parts, right? So one, there's been a lot of people who've kind of wanted to just go and get out and just do some leisure travel, and obviously international travel in terms of airfare, flights out of the country are still extremely limited right now, almost non-existent. And so a lot of domestic travel is kind of filling that void. So, and a lot more travel to beaches and stations. And you're seeing it, like if you try to down south, if you try to get out to Chikmagalur or Coorg or some of these popular destinations, you're seeing this massive backlog there, and you can't even find properties in terms of your rental, or Airbnbs or just typical resorts. So you're seeing just a huge demand. So I think that's one thing that we see quite a bit to access there. And then also the other major use case, and this is actually one that's a little bit newer in nature, I would say, is that there's a huge amount of people wanting to go back to their native, to their village or their kind of smaller town, city where they're from, and visiting family. So that use case has kind of come up in spades, and it's been a really major use case because a lot of people have been, of course, locked down or just haven't been out moving around as much, and so trying to get back home and visit family or extended family. And so that has been something which has worked out well, because in those cases people are not going to take a train or take a bus to go the last mile to get to those places. They'd rather take a car. So I think that's a major one that we expect to continue.
I mean, I completely agree with Greg on a lot of points, and I think all of those all of those trends are coming in for us as well. In addition to that, during the period of the first wave that came in, and also when the second wave was sort of taking up heat, we also realized that a lot of healthcare workers or frontline workers were requiring vehicles for this period because public transport was not as safe, or in certain cases, at least in the first wave, the public transport was actually switched off. So that was a requirement that did come up. I think in terms of the major destinations for leisure travel, in the north, we are seeing a lot of travel to the hills. We are seeing a significant amount of travel to Uttarakhand and Himachal, etc. And people are, I think there are some beautiful properties that are sort of getting taken over by people from Delhi and Punjab and everywhere around. But I think we're also seeing a significant amount of travel to the beach. We actually had people taking cars from us from Delhi to go all the way to Goa. And over a 3-day trip, just because it was so much more safer and the entire family could travel together without worrying about the excessive exposure to the virus. So those kind of trends are also coming in. People don't mind taking the longer road trips anymore.
Right. I want to bring you in, Mr. Gupta, to understand the kind of the way business models are changing in this space. We've been seeing different kinds of models evolve at this point in time. So I wanted to understand from you at Avis India, what kind of models are you seeing which are working out in terms of traction going forward?
I think one definite trend we are seeing is that people are more keen to access mobility rather than own means of transport. So which means especially among the younger people who may not have a very long-term perspective on life or where it takes them, they are taking decisions which are closer to today. And so we are seeing a lot of trend towards people accessing cars rather than owning it. And I think it's not just the fact that you have to make a down payment to buy a car. There are also a lot of practical hassles of registration, insurance, damage, repair and maintenance and all that. So we're seeing a definite trend towards people who would want to just access the car when they want it and not be burdened with the ownership of the same. And we're seeing this trend a lot more amongst the people who are, let's say, 40 minus, who are looking at probably taking a decision about buying or hiring. And more often than not, they're looking at a hiring option. And there are a lot of models which are available, some which have been there for many years, like self-drive. There have also been cases or models of subscription. And so there are a lot of models, but I think the more secular trend is that let's try to delay buying your own car. Let's access it through a lot of models available.
That brings me to the point of subscription-based models, which I want to bring you in, Greg, for to understand what kind of models are panning out in the subscription space. And at Zoomcar, are you looking at different ways to build out this business model?
Sure. So yeah, I think with subscription, one of the major trends that we've seen over the last 12 months, and particularly during the second wave here, is that people have really opted aggressively for flexibility. So really going towards flexibility and convenience, and of course, affordability is always going to be important for people. But I think the convenience and flexibility around it, during the pandemic and coming out of it, is most critical. So that means that you're seeing trends tilting more towards shorter vacations. So it kind of it feeds into what the broader panel we've been discussing, and I think certainly when you look at like 2, 3, 4 months as a tenor, as a period, versus say 2 years or 2.5, 3 years. So yeah, I think you're certainly seeing more of a bias towards the shorter duration because it gives more convenience, more flexibility, and trying to obviously see how you can build a broader structure that accommodates an easier breakage or an easier termination, because people just don't have a whole lot of visibility or certainty into what they'll be doing say 6 months, 12 months out, just given COVID. So I think that's certainly there. From Zoomcar's perspective, we're all about enabling that ecosystem, and our focus is primarily on the technology side there, where we're really more enabling enterprises to go out and execute on subscription businesses. So working closely with especially OEMs and other large sort of fleet owners. So that's really how we've decided to play it. And that's where we think really we can add the most value to that ecosystem.
I want to talk to you, Sakshi, specifically about the subscription-based model. While in Airbnb and other vacation rentals, we are seeing short-term leases, long-term leases play out. Will you be also considering these kind of models when it comes to vehicle renting, considering that people are traveling for longer periods of time rather than doing a short 2-day holiday? They're doing 10 days in a certain place because remote working is allowed. So are you looking at these kind of models where there's a long-term lease and it's cheaper for people to hire a car over a longer period?
Priya, what we have seen over the last year is subscription under the Myles brand, Myles Zero, has actually taken a front seat for us, primarily for a couple of reasons. First up, I think people have seen the uncertainty of the times and the unreasonable nature of investing in a vehicle for a long period of time. And that coupled with the idea that a lot of people have had financial crunches, but the need to have a dedicated vehicle over time is something that is leading them to bring, changes to the way they acquire vehicles. As Myles Zero, we're really focusing on becoming an alternative to vehicle acquisition, but just becoming more accessible, flexible, and affordable. Once we do that, our primary focus over the last year and a half actually has been integrating with vehicle manufacturers. So we've got Maruti Suzuki, Toyota, MG Motors, and we're also getting some more partners in place where we're sort of helping them introduce subscription to their customers through all of their sales touch points. So the customer can now come in and acquire vehicles for the period for which they want to, instead of paying for the entire cost of the car. And so that's picking up in a big way for us. And Myles Zero is where we're sort of focused on that. We're also seeing that customers are more and more interested in having that car at home, which had become, but not investing in the complete vehicle for the period of time, and therefore we're bringing in a large number of options So whether it's a used car, whether it's a completely new vehicle, whether it's a commercial vehicle or a privately registered vehicle, the customer can actually acquire the car based on their use case or and the budget. And that's what's making it a lot more easier, and where we are seeing a lot of growth for subscription as well.
Right. Ms. Gupta, I want to talk to you about the key revenue driving categories for you at Avis India. If you could run us through which of these categories have been driving maximum revenue, if you could speak about segments within the whole space like hatchbacks, etc., which are driving revenue, to give us our viewers an overall picture of the entire scenario.
Yeah, so actually we are in all segments of mobility, whether it is one-day booking to something like a car for 5 years. So we take care of the entire range of durations, and we also offer either commercial vehicles or private vehicles, number plated. So we have a full range, and I think the biggest component would be the corporate need for travel, followed closely by retail. And then we have the segment wherein people have pooled cars run by companies to pick up their employees from various locations and take them to a designated place and back. So all these three segments actually are growing very well. And you must recognize that Indian mobility is extremely poorly served. So if we see per capita investment or our expenditure in mobility is very poor. So there's a huge growth possibility. And all that we are careful about is to stay in step with the customer. So of course, give good service. And also as he changes, we also change our business models to stay in step with him. So that's, I think, what has worked for us. And since the potential in the Indian market is huge, there's lots of opportunities in all spaces. We're also seeing a slow transition away from IC engines to EVs and ultimately to autonomous vehicles whenever they come. So again, we have made sure that we are able to transit as the engine technology moves. We also have a contactless booking system for all our services. So especially in terms of COVID, when people are scared of contact, our contactless technology-based booking and fulfillment system has really worked very well for us during the COVID period.
Right. Greg, I want to talk to you about the kind of expansion that you're planning in terms of your fleet at this point in time, and what's the kind of overall growth plan that you have in mind for Zoomcar?
Sure. Well, I think, as has been discussed really across the panel here, I think the major metros, kind of the top 10 cities are really the focus for Zoomcar as well. And, so as we see this, it's about really ensuring that the service becomes more and more hyper-local. And I think one of the constraints that we've seen over the last several years in the business has been, demand is many, I think that's been consistent really across the year across the cities. And I think now coming out of the second wave and with vaccines where they are and where they're going, I think it's very clear where the demand is going. So for us, it's about building supply in a hyper-local way. So across cities like Bangalore and Delhi, Hyderabad, etc., you need to make sure that you have relevant supply of different segments in different parts of the city. So if you live, somewhere in North Bangalore or close to the airport, you're not going to kind of go and haul all the way to, say, Koramangala or to Whitefield to pick up, to get a vehicle. And then it might not be as economic to deliver that vehicle to that person's house because of the broader cost, right? So there's elements of those which you really have to think through. And, on some levels, the only way to really solve that is just by building more supply in geographically dispersed parts of the city. And so the prime focus will be to kind of make sure that, really everyone in these cities has a really robust option list of vehicles within 1 kilometer of where they're based. And so to do that, you need to, kind of, at least from where we are today, you want to, at least double, triple kind of your broader presence over the next, couple of months and, couple of quarters. So I think that's really at least how we're thinking about the broader charter to serve the customers. Yeah, I think we're looking at probably from where we are today, at least 3 to 4x growth from where we sit right now. So I think that's pretty safe to say. So, our platform we're close to 10,000 cars right now on the overall platform, and yeah, so we would expect to grow that. As I said, to have somewhere close to 30K. Broadly, I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation at this point.
Right. Sakshi, a final question for you in terms of how you're looking at expansion and what kind of numbers can we expect out there in terms of maximum growth and fleet expansion?
Priya, our expansion is primarily focused on the subscription side of the business. Our model of expansion there is to integrate with OEMs and the variety of touch points of vehicle sales wherever they exist. There are close to about 3 million new and 3 million used cars that are bought and sold in this country today. We are expecting that over the next year's time, we should be able to expand to at least 1% of that market. And moving forward over the next 5 years, we should be able to get to at least 5 to 7% of that market, definitely being primarily into subscription. Since we already work with Maruti Suzuki and Toyota, that means that we are currently covering almost about 50, 55, 56% of the new vehicle sales market. And that's where we're trying to introduce the alternate ownership method through subscription.
Right. And a closing comment from you, Mr. Gupta, to ask you a little bit about what your expansion plans are in terms of the kind of numbers that we can expect, both in terms of fleet expansion as well as cities that you are looking at expanding into.
See, if we come to cities, we are in about 20 cities now, and we should be in about 30 cities because we're seeing a lot of growth and demand coming in from second tier towns. And we see our fleet going up in the next 12 months by about 30% over what we have today. And it's coming in from cases of lease for 1 year, short-term leases, from leisure travel, corporate business picking up again. So we see about a 30-40% increase in our fleet size for the next 12 months. I think the recovery all of us would have noticed is far sharper after the second wave. And so we are all sort of scrambling now to get our hands on cars, what with the chip shortage and a lot of car OEMs not being able to supply, waiting periods of 3-4 months. So we are grappling with that because now the time has come to really expand your fleets and get going. We hope that the chip problem gets solved soon, but it's not going to be in a hurry because there's a chip shortage across the world. So I think what's going to also happen is that the second-hand market is going to see far more demand. If you can't get a new car, you might as well go in for a second-hand car. So we see that part also growing smartly. And so it'll be a mix of sort of all segments and trying to wait out supplies from the OEMs.
All right. On that note, thank you very much, panel, for joining us today. It's been a really insightful discussion, and I'm sure the viewers have a lot to take back from this. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, time now to wrap up this edition of the Daily Dispatch. I'll catch you tomorrow at 5 p.m. Goodbye and have a lovely day.